Sweet.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cecil Lammey, and I collect Jordans. And there's Sigmund Bloom, and he says, be nice. And there's Matt Waldman, and whatever he says, listen to. It
Be
is the
nice.
Audible line.
Unless I tell you,
Or
I
leave.
tell you it's Friday.
Yeah, don't listen to Matt about calendar. Matt, you're in full RSP mode. Matt Waldman, RSP.com. Get your rookie scouting portfolio pre-ordered. This thing obviously is the number one, draft preview, skill position preview in the market. Clearly the best in the business. So last week, can we tell the story, Matt? Are you okay with that? We can tell the story about last week on the show. We said, hey, Dr. Gene's on assignment. We may have Matt Waldman, but we didn't have Matt Waldman last week because
I didn't realize what day it was. There were 2 days last week that I didn't know what day it was because I've been working nights I've kind of been working like from 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon till about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, then going to sleep. And just kind of my days got mixed up. So there were like 2 days last week that I didn't know what day it was. And I was like a day behind or a day ahead.
Yeah, Sigmund, we call that supreme dedication. And of course, it comes from Matt Waldman. Am I right, Sig?
Yeah, we call that draft season too. And I think it is, I know I've seen Matt tweeting out at like 6 a.m. Well, it's time to go to sleep. And it's a good insight. Really, I don't think you could do any better marketing or, advertising for the RSP than people knowing that is the kind of work that goes into it and it comes across. So all the family out there listening and watching right now, already, but for people that don't know, find out the RSP and also, to get a little tease, a little taste here. It's really fun. Draft seasons, I notice, and y'all can weigh in on this, I feel like every cycle, draft Twitter, the draft world, draft Knicks, whatever you want to call it, get smarter and there's more elements, more angles, there's more cross-pollination of information, challenging each other in a respectful way, and it keeps this fresh just the same way that the new crop of prospects to learn and project keeps it fresh, and it's a wonderful time to do this.
Well, Sigmund, and here's why, and we can say the same thing about the fantasy industry. There was a time in the fantasy industry where it's like, targets? Oh my God, targets? You know what I mean? Like everything's just become at a higher level. And that's why it's great to be in the draft community. It's great to see Matt Waldman doing his thing because no one will ever touch what Matt Waldman does. But Matt, I'm sure you feel the same way. Like it's good for the community when people can look at things from different angles. We can talk about all these different numbers and metrics and just personalities of these players. And it's much different than I grew up a Sooners fan and I love Baker Mayfield or whoever. I remember people saying Jason White could play, right? And that clearly wasn't the case. And college football fans are a little crazy anyway. But Matt, this is just kind of par with the course. When an industry becomes larger, it gets more thorough, and that's a good thing.
Absolutely, because it used to be you go to the combine, either the combine was worthwhile or it was worthless, as opposed to actually now there's discussion about, well, here's what the vertical jump actually means, and here's what the 3-cone actually applies to these types of positions. And then you have guys like Brad Kelly, who I've seen over this past several months with Cover One. Is the site, and he's a high school wide receiver coach, but he puts out terrific videos. You should go on Twitter and check out his Twitter moments, where he does these videos on the wide receivers that he's been studying, and you get a really technique heavy look at those types of players. And it's a lot of fun that we can have people that range from consultants at positions to coaches to people who are studying the data, and then people who are trying to combine as much of that as possible, because that's where it's eventually going to go, is trying to apply everything with the level of context that you need it to be. And Twitter is such a fantastically rich environment for all of that. And, and I would just recommend, if you go to Footballguys, and check out, in addition to, Bloom's work, the Bloom 100 is just fantastic. This is just a tradition you got to look at every year, but we've got great content there, Footballguys, but also, I'll tweet it out as well at some point about, again, maximizing Twitter and, how to do that with just, using TweetDeck. so that you can kind of filter through there. So if you're afraid of all the bad reputation that Twitter has, it's really just an exercise in self-restraint. But at the same time, and I think everyone fails that every day. But on there, but because that's what exercises are designed to do. But at the same time, you can kind of minimize all of that chatter to just draft to the draft world or football world, and you can have your own channel, and it won't be as dizzying of a pace when you do it that way.
Well, and longtime listeners are going to know this rant already, but I'll do it anyway. It's one of the reasons why I have issues with Bob Costas, because he always seemed to talk down to football fans, like, "Oh, baseball is so," and I'm going to blast baseball here, Bloom. And we're 5 minutes into the show.
What?
I'm blasting baseball.
That's not baseball season anyway. They're colluding to keep free agents. They're taking a page out of football's book and colluding to keep A down among their players. So.
Right. Well, here's the thing, and Matt highlighted it, and Sig, you've done it as well. And I hope we certainly cater to this audience. I believe we do. There's a ton of smart football fans, right? There's the guy, paint your face, beer belly, 2 beers on the hat, whatever, which is cool, right? I'm down with that guy. The guy who says, "You the man" at every golf tournament. Okay, that sports fan, that's awesome. And to be major, you need to capture the casual fan, something that hockey doesn't understand whatsoever. There's a hockey rant for you. But the NFL, there is a thirst for knowledge from fans who have been talked down to for decades. Like, you're not going to understand this quarters coverage, this cover 3, these sale concepts. Why would we explain that to you? Look at how people reacted to Tony Romo. They thought he was effing Nostradamus because he was looking at the safeties and telling you what the coverage was and where the play should go. And then, shocker, that's where the play went. And listen, this is nothing against Romo. I thought Romo did a fine job. But Sigmund, this is just feeding the audience that thirsts for knowledge. And I love that. I love that people want to be smarter about football. And there's an old school industry, and I'll get into specifics if y'all want to, but there's an old school segment of the industry that doesn't understand. By the way, and I'll be vague, and maybe if I was drinking, I would be a little bit more specific. Anyone taking shots at smart football on Twitter, old school scouts?
Oops.
Stop. You're looking so bad when you do that, because smart football and Chris, I mean,
they got that straightened out, by the way.
Okay, good. I'm glad. I just heard
apologized too.
Good. Okay, I'm very glad about that. But that old school part of the industry, you have to realize that people that didn't play or didn't scout can have quality opinions through quality work. And that's what this whole thing is about, Sigmund, right? It's about everyone doing the quality work. Let's enjoy each other's time. Let's talk about these things that we love.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. And I love that Matt brought up Brad Kelly. I know Kagan Cantrell has been doing tremendous work breaking football. And it's just fantastic every year. I mean, in some ways, I feel like lucky that I get grandfathered in because we've been doing this for a while, because the work every year we see everybody's challenging each other, pushing each other to higher levels. And as you said, it's because of the fan base. It's all just we are part of the ecosystem or the bloodstream of what the people out there want. And that's the only reason we have an audience, the only reason we can sit here and do this. We would sit here at Cecil and I, the first ever Audible wasn't recorded for anybody. It was Cecil and I talking on the phone for 3 hours. And Matt Waldman and I probably spent countless hundreds, thousands of hours talking on the phone about prospects. So we would do this anyway, but we wouldn't, comb our hair or something, if people didn't want it. And it's really a joy and a privilege. And it's a joy and a privilege to watch that smart football audience grow. And definitely a tip of the cap too to Chris Brown, who carries the at smart football. Like, he deserves that moniker because he's another one who set the tone, and we're all just lucky to be able to do this.
I mean,
guess what time it is, everyone? Sorry about that. Yeah, breaking news everywhere. Things happening everywhere. So, we just saw Aqib Talib traded tonight. All these trades. Matt, let's jump into that. Speaking of the way football is done now and kind of the new school thinking, I can't remember who had it out there, and I don't remember who, but we talked about it. The trade tsunami and doing these trades. and you see what do the Rams have, Matt? Like 4 trades already, something like that. Like, is this kind of the new way and a new way of thinking where it used to be like, you're never going to trade trades? What are that in the NFL? And now I think that's kind of the currency that these teams are using rather than waiting someone out, releasing a guy, and then trying to get in on the feeding frenzy when you got teams like the Jets and the Browns that have $100 million in cap space.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes total sense for that to be, the wave of the future in terms of what they're doing, because, I mean, the teams are just getting a little bit smarter about their cap, and they're kind of figuring it out, in terms of, jumping, being the first to be able to take advantage of the situation. So, I mean, a part of that is just probably a younger infusion of blood into front offices, and probably, again, maybe even looking at the numbers a little bit more and seeing things from kind of a wider purview. And I think that's a good sign, because in the past, I mean, you talk about the old school mentality, and I mean, you can equate the NFL to basically a mom and pop company that had a good product, and it grew up, and all those people on the ground floor got jobs, and then their sons got jobs, and then their nephews got jobs, and then you have inbred, kind of half their employees are kind of inbred, and as a result of that, there's no competition, and they share the profits. So, if every team's a branch, every branch got money regardless of how well they did or not. So when you look at it from that standpoint, there are a lot of companies like that around the world, and especially in the US, there's some. And if you've ever worked for any of those, if you're new to that company, or you want to bring in a new idea and you've worked there for a while, still they're greeted with well, we've always done it this way, or right. What do you guys know? You just don't understand. We understand the industry. We understand what's going on. Well, I'm glad that because you started out as a halfback or as an offensive lineman, basically, running the plays in and out for your coach back in the 1950s, that now that you've made it to to this part of the century, that suddenly you also know everything about analytics, everything about how to hire people, how to interview people, and how not to get in trouble with, policies about how you ask questions, because, they just don't understand that we need to ask things about people's sexuality and then try to jostle them a little bit by asking if their moms, sell themselves, things like that. So.
Right. I mean, I really thought we were past all that, Sigmund. There still is that old school mentality. We don't necessarily have to get into that all can of worms from Darius Geis thing.
Name names, Darius Geis. Name names.
Exactly. What was the Falcons that asked an inappropriate question? Nick Casa was asked an inappropriate question.
Right,
but
the Dolphins.
The Dolphins, of course, with Des Bryant. Anyway, but I think these trades, Bloom, the NFL loves the excitement. And as my partner, Mike Pritchard, says, the NFL is an excitement business. We say it's entertainment. No, it's excitement, right?
Adrenaline.
And trades are really, ratings are down, stand for the flag, all these sorts of things that are swirling around. By the way, they better get Peyton Manning for Monday Night Football, or it'll be atrocious without John Gruden. It was barely tolerable anyway. Anyway, Bloom.
Right.
Its excitement has been really good for the league.
It is, and it's funny because of that old school crew will often say it's not fantasy football, in some ways a shot at us. But guess what? In a way it is. And what we're seeing that we love about fantasy football, which we're seeing now bleed over into the league with these trades, are informed football minds putting their money where their mouth is and making moves based on weighing out, this is what this resource is worth to me, this is what this resource is worth to you. So let's see, and maybe you might see something that I have is worth more to you than it is to me, and I see something that you have that's worth more to me than it is to you, so let's trade. And what you're seeing now also is, even though the cap is going up, it's so fascinating because the NFL is a socialist league, believe it or not, even though it's a billionaires, because of one of the things Matt was talking about was spreading out this money in the cap, parity, Pete Rozelle, and Pete we trust. We got a nod to Pete Rozelle, but at the same time, what you see is this wild varying of teams where teams are in different cap situations. So, for instance, we've got Miami. where like they're talking about cutting Ndamukong Suh. And how do you get in a situation where you have to cut Ndamukong Suh, who is still one of the best players in the game, you know? Well, you tag Jarvis Landry thinking that somebody's going to trade for him. I don't think that Jarvis Landry is going to find that the market's going to pay him what he wants. I think the teams are waking up to the idea that what Jarvis Landry provides, while it is valuable, is not rare. And they're not going to pay him rare money. So guess what? Jarvis Landry was smart. $16 million for a year is smart. Maybe they'll trade him to Chicago, Tennessee. But those teams that they're looking at this draft class and say, well, I can spend a second round pick on Christian Kirk and have at least a 50-50 shot at getting that for like 1/7 of the cost. Why would I do that? Again, teams weighing out these commodities. Alec Ogletree, who the Rams signed to a long-term deal, see that he's not a good fit for Wade Phillips. The Giants, who've been rubbing two sticks together at linebacker forever, they would happily give a pick to get Alec Ogletree. Meanwhile, the Rams are looking at that cap room as the commodity because they need to sign Aaron Donald. They need to tag LaMarcus Joyner. They still want to keep Sammy Watkins. Oh, and then they can go out and get Aqib Talib. You can almost look at Aqib Talib as put those two trades together, Aqib Talib and Alec Ogletree, and fits, right? Because Aqib Talib as a number one, I don't know. Aqib Talib is a number two in a Wade Phillips defense. Thank you very much. So you have teams like the Rams, the Eagles trading for Michael Bennett, where the Seahawks are trying to maybe look more at culture than at Legion of Boom. Rest in peace. It was fun while it lasted. It should have been 2 Super Bowls. Just my son, you deserve that carry. So, and then on the other hand, you have a team like the Browns that is playing the game of a mass picks, mass cap room, a mass picks, a mass cap room, but they're not doing what the Eagles and Rams did, which is use those picks and cap room to build a team and build it around a culture, an identity, organizational clarity, and people who are going to activate that. So it isn't just based on the haves and have-nots in terms of cap room. It isn't just based on the haves and have-nots in terms of draft. It always comes back to organizational clarity. Again, Bill Belichick showed us this a long time ago. And you're starting to see, even though there's the cap that's supposed to make everything level, there's still this separation. And I think it's separation based on drink clarity. Teams that know what they want to do, and the other teams that are chasing. It's like chasing lost money. All the gamblers among you. I know we don't have any gamblers.
Gambling's illegal at Bushwood.
It's illegal, yeah. But you're chasing lost money. The Dolphins made a ton of terrible signings last year. Julius Thomas, Lawrence Timmons, Kiko Alonso, Andre Branch. If they don't make those terrible signings, and Jets fans are nodding along, Mike Tannenbaum, then they're not putting. They could have Sue and Landry and trade for Robert Quinn. And another one where the Rams are saying, yeah, Robert Quinn at one time looked like a future star, maybe not so much now. But the Dolphins were happy to pony up a pick, give up a pick for the privilege of paying Robert Quinn $11 million this year, and now they may have to trade Ndamukong Suh. So it cuts both ways. You have the teams using this freer market to get better, and then you have the teams using this freer market to maybe get worse. And it really does mirror what happens in fantasy leagues, because we all see sometimes that trade where we see the trade go down and we say, like Gerald McCoy. This is another fun layer, Cecil, that's brand new as I ramble on, but it's also stimulating. The offseason, NFL is the only sport where the offseason.
Well, you're getting into the prices, because that's where I was going to go. Like, these prices indicate teams are thinking in a different way.
Absolutely. And then you have players weighing in, right? You have Gerald McCoy going on Twitter saying, like, well, Tampa has a lot of cap room. Why couldn't we get Michael Bennett? So and you have Cam Newton commenting on Instagram where the Panthers say, which one of these receivers do you want free agency? And Cam says, all of the above. So even the players are playing it like fantasy football, or like they're fans of the teams, their own teams, and reacting in real time with us. And it's a wonderful age, because even though we've only been doing this together for 12 years now, it feels like things have changed so much in that time, especially around what we do and our experience of this game.
Matt, we see your avatar. Are you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can't see you, but let's discuss
the crow. It's almost like we see him with the crow there.
Right. It's the crow. It's your avatar. That's what we see. So let's discuss this and how these prices. I mean, Talib just happening. I'm getting phone calls and texts right now about more Broncos stuff that I can't say yet. But Matt, like these prices, 5th rounder for Talib. What was Peters, Bloom, like 2nd and 4th? whatever it was.
Nothing. And he's still on his rookie deal.
Right. I mean, just nothing. Swapping these guys for nothing. It's an indication the NFL has a different line of thinking. At least some teams do, Matt.
Yeah, and I think it's just one of those situations where they just feel like that at a certain point they're not gonna get anything, so they might as well get something out of this deal. And also just when it comes to negotiating, I just think that as you get into the open market with some positions, the kind of the way that players devalue every year, is pretty quick. And so team, they look at it probably as a situation where, yeah, maybe Talib has another couple of years that are going to be very strong, but it's just a scenario where, for them, they'd rather sacrifice some of that value that they could get, at least to get something in return.
Is the Audible live here on Thursday night? Cecil Lammey, Matt Waldman, Sigmund Bloom, talking about what's going on in the National Football League. We're also taking your questions in the chat room, so chat room can react to me and react to us tonight. I love saying that. I love having you guys participate as well. So we're going to go through some questions. We've got plenty of time, like we did quarterbacks a bit last week. We got plenty of time to go through some running backs, but first and foremost, to kind of kick things off, and then we're going to get into your questions in the chat room. Matt, I want to discuss Saquon Barkley. Had a tremendous combine, very humble, very grounded to talk to. Love, just what the type of person that Saquon Barkley seems to be. I love that type of. I mean, this guy's a freak, right? We're talking perhaps, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but Herschel Walker level of talent. Now, not the striker, not the physical guy that Herschel Walker is, something that Bloom has been discussing and highlighting. Let's discuss Saquon Barkley. Potentially as the number 1 overall pick. They would be the first running back since good old Keep-Jana Carter in 1995. Bloom, were you working in a gas station in 1995? Because I
was on Fish Tour.
Okay. Fish Tour. I was grinding, $4 an hour or whatever it was at the gas station. So, Matt, let's discuss Barkley. The numbers after contact or picking up yards after contact, something Bloom's been talking about, aren't great. Anyone that's watched Barkley knows that he's physically so gifted and can do so many things. He's not a striker. He's not a guy that's going to bull over people. Perhaps you'd want to see a little bit more of that. Maybe you don't, Matt. So let's get into Barkley. Clearly seen in a great running back class as far and away the best of that great bunch.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you take a look at Barkley and in terms of what he has to offer, first and foremost, everyone loves the great athlete who can make people miss and take a distance for a touchdown. And so when you look at Barkley, the way that he can move and how fluid he is, it's kind of understandable that if you're that fluid and that quick and you have that top end speed, that your first thought as a running back isn't to run people over. Your first thought is, I can make them miss. I can make anybody miss. So when you watch his tape, it's, if he's going to err in any way, he's going to err to a fault in thinking that I can run around people. I can create and make that extra move. I don't like that hole that's right there. Let me see if there's something better. And so when you look at Barkley, overall as a prospect, the thing that's great about him is that for his size, he is a scat back in terms of moves and in terms of speed. So that's a fantastic thing because it can be somewhat deceptive for people in the NFL early on. It's going to be deceptive for defenders because they're going to see that body and they know he's quick, but they're still not going to be able to get the angle there. They're not going to approach it with the same amount of urgency that they would if it was, a smaller player who was coming around a corner or who was cutting back, because you just naturally don't anticipate that kind of quickness. But, he's also probably one of the best receivers in this class. I mean, when you watch his receiving ability, he's someone that, last year or 2016, I was watching him make some contested catches in the end zone that you would have been happy to see a wide receiver make. And so they don't do that a lot with him, but it's enough that you can see that the skill's there. Now, when it comes to people call it nitpicking when they talk about it. And I think that they need to stop saying that, because
Yeah.
no player is perfect. And to say that's nitpicking, it's kind of like saying that it was nitpicking about David Johnson because, saying that he wasn't ready for a zone scheme right away. Well, I'm sorry, if you were going to bet your house that David Johnson was going to be great the entire rookie year, you would have lost your house, as good as he was at the end of the year. And you would have lost your house because of Chris Johnson, a banged up, washed up Chris Johnson was starting ahead of them. And there was even talk heading into the next summer that Chris Johnson might start ahead of him. People go, oh, that was just talk. No, that was, we need to make sure that David Johnson understands how to run a zone scheme. So when you look at Saquon Barkley, some of the things that happen, people like to excuse because they say, oh, well, his offensive line was really bad and he didn't, that's why he bounced things outside, or that's why he tried so hard. And you can try and get into the motivation of the player, but this is where I think it goes too far to the end of narrative in a bad way. When you look at the behaviors, you look at the Ohio State game, you will see a number of plays where he has a very good crease. He's in the red zone and he decides he's halfway into the crease and decides he's going to try and bounce his way back outside it 1, 2, 3 times within the same play and end up losing yards. And he did that repeatedly in that game. He does it in other games as well. So when you look at decision making, these are things that are important to consider. Does it mean that I'm going to look at Saquon Barkley and say that he's a bust? No. Am I going to say that he's not one of the best backs in this class? Absolutely not. He's a terrific talent. But it's the same time, if you want to understand, say, as a fantasy owner, I'm going to take Saquon Barkley first overall as my rookie pick. Great. Then if you're 2 to 3 weeks into the season and he's not performing well and you're wondering why, and you're wondering what you may need to do about it, because are you going to wait it out? Well, if someone could tell you in advance that Saquon Barkley is trying too hard, kind of like Reggie Bush, the last great generational back of, in 10 years, everyone thought was going to be Gale Sayers incarnate, who was struggling at times because he was trying to do too much, because he could make everyone miss at USC. So now it was time to bounce everything outside and reverse field. And it took him a good year and a half to kind of figure out that he needed to stop doing some of that. Did it make, if you could know that in advance and know that maybe your timeline for Saquon Barkley making the Pro Bowl might take a little longer than you expected, and there might be a risk that someone might bench him, maybe you would make sure that you would have a reserve running back on your team that you would feel good about starting. So with Barkley, when you look at his tape, he's got very good vision. It could get a little bit better. He doesn't break an awful lot of tackles. And that's not just linebackers or defensive tackles hitting him head on. It's getting wrapped by a defensive backs at the ankles, ankle biting tackles he falls down through. Now he can break some. And when you ask him when he decides he's going to lower his shoulders and hit that crease the way he's supposed to, he can push people back and he can get those tough yards. So I'm not that worried about him at all. But to say he's far and away the best back, if you're going to look at a guy as a matchup where you say, I want a guy who can carry it 20 to, touch it 20 to 25 times in a game. Yes. I want a guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield and be a breakaway threat. Absolutely. Probably should be your top back. If you want a back who's more like what Marshawn Lynch gave to the Seahawks or Frank Gore gave to the 49ers, not so fast.
It is the Audible Live, and Bloom, it's your turn to chime in on Saquon Barkley. And really, here's 2 things that need to cease, pun intended. Cease and desist time on the Audible.
Oh, I like it.
It is nitpicking. This is nitpicking. You guys are nitpicking. We're doing our stinking jobs, okay? Number 2, and this is for all of my friends who used to play in the NFL or what have you. Game recognized game. If you can play, you can play. A player can tell. They can see it right away. They could tell. All right? It's the same reason why I hated that Mike McCoy stood on the table for Garrett Bowles in last year's draft. Mike McCoy is a well-respected coach, even though he destroyed the Broncos offense last year until he got fired. He's not a scout. I want evaluators evaluating coaches you can listen to, but that don't make those decisions based on the coach really, really liked it. Anyway, Bloom, getting off track, ranting, let's talk about Barkley, who is nearly perfect, but not completely perfect.
Well, Matt did a tremendous job, like always, and he overlapped with a lot of things that I would have said and have been, like you said, have been out there saying. He's not perfect. And it's not just that he's not perfect because, you know, he could be Bo Jackson instead of Herschel Walker. I mean, he is probably, I think athletically, Bo Jackson's the last running back we've seen that has a true constellation of physical gifts that there's no gaps in those gifts at all. But when you watch him play, a lot of the things that I have in my weaknesses for Barkley align with the things that Matt was talking about. And look, let's get a few things out of the way. Barkley is probably the best receiving back in this class, would be the best receiving back in a lot of classes. The name David Johnson comes up when you talk about him as a receiver. Route running, ball skills, run after catch ability, and also he's one of the best, if not the best, pass blocking running back in this class. And obviously he's a physical marvel who can break any touch for a touchdown, but it's something that shows through in his mentality running the ball. And this is something actually that I think there was hints of this on David Johnson's tape at University of Northern Iowa. Now, that being said, David Johnson was a 3rd round pick. You're not talking about spending a top 5 pick on him. And Bruce Arians and Stump Mitchell, I forget who it was from the Arizona writers that I had to make sure to give Stump Mitchell credit too, that I think challenged David Johnson to have a more combative idea to his game. But like Matt was saying, you know, if what the Jags drafted Leonard Fournette to do last year, you would not draft Saquon Barkley to do, not based on how he ran the ball at Penn State, because looking through some of my weaknesses, you know, I see him retreat. I see him take, as Matt was saying, the worst of confrontations, and not always the worst of confrontations with linebackers or defensive linemen, but with defensive backs. He rarely looks to initiate contact. He rarely takes the straightest route, where, you know, sometimes you'll see a running back, especially on, say, you know, a little dump off, have 2 or 3 tacklers have him dead to rights, and at that point you have to just stick your head down and get the 2 or 3 yards that are there. And he wants to try to retreat and swerve. He'll give up yards that even at the college level, because we would see this with running backs who can get away with it in college but can't get away with it in the pros. Well, he's not getting away with it in college at times, but still you see that pattern. He doesn't really finish his runs. He doesn't push the pile. It's just one of those things that, you know, if you're watching the other runners in this class like Darius Geis or Nick Chubb, you see that anger, that seething anger. Marshawn Lynch was a good name to bring up. And then where it really schematically can be a problem is I call him an inside to outside runner. You know, he wants to, like Matt said, taking things to the corner store. It's not just a wonderful a term to coin of this attitude running the ball where you always want to take it outside. And sure, he has the physical gifts to make that work at times, but even sometimes his physical gifts don't bail him out of that. So, you know, he's going to leave yards on the field. There's going to be times, especially when you think about power running schemes, where you're going to have to run through contact. You have to run through trash. And I know there's been a conversation about this. I think Matt was the one who brought it up. The idea of not yards after contact, but yards through contact.
Yes.
And, you know, these are things that are a real conversation. And if it's Indianapolis and you're having Saquon Barkley line up next to Andrew Luck, and he's running a lot of routes out of the backfield, and he's in there for protection, and you're spreading the field. You know, I think Frank Reich and Nick Sirianni are going to take the Colts offense into the present and really get more out of Andrew Luck, knock on wood that he's healthy, than the previous regime was getting out of him, just leaving him out there to shoot his way out, like we were saying. I think Saquon Barkley would be an excellent fit for what I expect the Colts to do with Frank Reich, you know, coming out of Doug Peterson, and there's no rules of the plays you're allowed to have in your playbook and how you're allowed to use the players you have. But if the Giants' new regime wants to carry over some of the power running that they were doing last year, if they bring back DJ Fluke, or getting Andrew Norwell from Carolina, there's a lot of talk about that. Yeah, I don't know if Barkley's the best fit there. Cleveland, I mean, who knows? Cleveland's like just quizzical. I mean, I think even Tampa Bay, I'm not sure that he's going to maximize. They're going to be able to maximize the value of Barkley. But that being said, just like David Johnson, Barkley could get that edge, that the anger, the mean streak to his game, and then we are looking at a generational running back. So the upside is there, even at pick 3 or 4, to be even better than what you thought you're going to get.
I have a feeling that Frank Reich is not going to do what Mike McCoy did and call plays during the game that you didn't practice during the week.
Oops.
Just spitballing there. The Audible Live, taking your questions in our chat room. We've got about 20 minutes left on tonight's show. Thank you all for listening, subscribing on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Now over 5,000 subscribers. Thank you very much. Millions, tens of millions of downloads for the Audible each and every year. So thank you all for listening on iTunes or however, Stitcher, whatever app you're using to listen to the Audible. We appreciate that as well. Zara says, if you guys have time, why is it hard for tight ends to transition to the pro level? We know this, Matt. We've seen it time and again. Talented players have come into this league and just taken a bit of time at that specific position. Why is it that tight ends are like that, whereas it used to be that way with wide receivers? Herman Moore, Marvin Harrison, always take a couple, 3 years, right? That doesn't really happen anymore. Wide receivers a little bit different now. Is that the same? Can that be said for tight ends? Or why is it that position, Dallas Goedert, Mandrew, whoever we want to talk about from this draft class, talented players, athletic players, but ones that maybe we should dial back the expectations year one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that is that tight end has always been one of the hardest positions to transition to in the NFL. And a lot of that has to do with blocking. Blocking is a different animal at the NFL level than it is at the college level. You can be big and strong at the college level, and probably, 4 to 6 of the teams that you face every week, you're just going to be able to manhandle the defender that you're working opposite. And then if you can't, they're probably running away from the side that you're blocking on if you're that tight end. And now you look at what's going on in college football, and a lot of spread offenses. So if you can catch and you're a tight end prospect, you're not being used as much in line. You're being used more in the slot or split outside. And even though you project well to be an every down tight end because of your size, when you get into the league, now you're not only is it about learning about the different techniques of blocking, how to strike, how to roll your hips through the contact so that you can actually generate a powerful punch without overextending. It's not just about where your hands are supposed to be, but knowing the different types of blocks and how to approach them matter. And then there's blitz pickups and understanding all the various different blitz pickups against the types of defenses that you're going to face. And they're going to be a lot different types of defenses and different variations of defenses. And then that extends to actual coverage. So then you're looking at, when you're actually going out for a pass, you have to be on the same page with your quarterback about the different hot reads that there are and what type of adjustments you have in zone and how the quarterback wants you to run certain routes against those zones, and just being able to read what zones there are, because there's different hybrid coverages in the NFL that you won't see in the college game, where one side is actually man and the other side's actually zone. And you might think that you're on the man side and you're actually on the zone side. And that's a lot to process all at once, when in addition to that, now the best guy that you ever faced, in college football is like the guy that you're facing every day in camp, and he's not even the starter, that you're dealing with at the line, So there's a lot to learn. Let's just put it this way: the best tight end who's been healthy on a regular basis is arguably Travis Kelce. He's been probably the best tight end, and it took him.
He had microfracture. The first year in the league, he missed a year with microfracture,
and it still took him some time to actually develop as a blocker in the way they wanted to. They had to have Anthony Fasano there because that guy's going to play till he's 100 because he can block, and that's basically, he's been still kind of wandering around the league collecting paychecks, because if you have a young tight end, get Fasano, because he's going to be able to help teach them, or at least be able to, do what they need to do in line. So that's kind of a lot of what needs, you kind of have to keep in mind when it comes to tight end play, unless you're going to use him strictly as a receiver, or he's a great blocker like OJ Howard was immediately. They're usually just one-dimensional or 1.5 dimensional early on.
Right. And we had a great tight end class last year. So like dynasty owners of Adam Shaheen, what have you, you're fine.
Yeah.
You're more than fine. I wish I had more stock, summer stock in Adam Shaheen. And, it gets to a tipping point, though. I mean, guys like Max Williams, hell, Crockett Gilmore is going to play tackle, so there is a tipping point where it's like, okay, maybe.
There are any kielbasa's in those Nike boxes?
Exactly. I'll break out a pair to show you guys the wing ones, which are never going to wear those ones. Limited to 19,000 pairs. Anyway, this is summer stock. This isn't the most underrated sneaker channel on YouTube. It's a shout out to my man Thomas the Franchise. This is the Audible, and Paul asks Bloom, where is Allen Robinson headed?
Well, I would have said this morning, I would have said San Francisco. You just think about Kyle Shanahan and what he could do with Allen Robinson and Pierre Garçon and Marquise Goodwin, maybe, and then they gave $20 million to Goodwin, and cheers to Goodwin. And I was well out on an island, and believe me, I'll talk about when I'm wrong too on the show. When Goodwin came out of Texas, I thought Texas wasn't using him the right way. And there was a lot more there as a football player than what Texas got out of him. And then in Buffalo, some of it was injuries. But I think Kyle Shanahan sees what he can do with these pieces, much like what's happening with these pieces in LA with the Rams, where you don't necessarily have to have, we'll see if LA can keep Sammy Watkins. I still think that the 49ers have the cap room to bring in Allen Robinson. And I would also think that one of the other things, and this is another, going back to that talk at the beginning of the show about the haves and have-nots, another thing where the haves and have-nots sort themselves out are the haves. As teams become haves, players want to play there. And as teams become have-nots, players don't want to play there. I think players want to go to San Francisco right now. With San Francisco put that kind of emphasis on Robinson, I don't know. Chicago makes a lot of sense. And while Chicago isn't coming off of a year like San Francisco or the Rams had, spicing up their offense, they do have the personnel led by Matt Nagy, the latest in the Andy Reid tree, to create that offense. You have Mitchell Trubisky. You have a young quarterback to grow with. So those two teams make a lot of sense to me in terms of cap room, in terms of need, and in terms of someplace that I think Allen Robinson would like to have, young quarterbacks to grow with. Other teams that have the cap room, and the Jets are going to want to sign everybody. Cleveland, even though they have Gordon and Coleman, why not? They're going to want to sign everybody. Indianapolis has cap room. There's Andrew Luck, but Indianapolis, I think, they need everything. So do they have the money to have two guys paid like number one receivers? I don't know. I really don't know. Those are the teams with a ton of cap room. Now, teams with enough cap room to maybe make a move, but does it make sense? Washington, yeah, I mean, they've got Josh Doxson. Are they really going to rely on him as an outside receiver? Washington. What's that?
Carolina have enough room?
Carolina has a little bit of wiggle room, and I think that if Allen Robinson would be willing to play for, I mean, if they structure it so that the cap room is put off.
Hey, Alshon Jeffrey played on a prove it deal, so why not?
I hope that Allen Robinson can get better than that. I really hope that I think what he showed 2 years ago, or 2015, showed me that he can be one of the best 5 receivers in the game. And he's still young enough that his best years are ahead of him. I hope he doesn't have to play on a prove it deal. He doesn't have all the nicks and bumps building up that Alshon Jeffrey had. But Carolina, so the teams, I was just looking at this today and sorting teams out. And Carolina has some wiggle room. Absolutely. certainly, I would love to see that. And I think Cam Newton is out there stumping for that too. But I would say it's going to come down to Chicago or San Francisco. And it's just a question of whether San Francisco has the interest. If not, I think Chicago will be happy to hand him a blank check and tell him fill out the numbers.
I love that our chat room is saying, like, quoth the Raven when Matt is talking and we see his avatar of the crow, which is also on his business cards, by the way. Matt Waldman, RSP.com. Get your rookie scouting portfolio pre-order. Do it now. You will not be disappointed, and you will be amazed and overwhelmed and so delighted by the content within the rookie scouting portfolio. Wendell saying, go, Crow, go. So there we have it. I think it's our man Mookie was asking a little bit earlier if you think sans Ted Thompson or Ted Thompson in a different role, Matt, will the Packers be a little bit more active this year? Because we're hearing buzz about that. I saw my man Aaron Nagler, our man Aaron Nagler. We love that guy. At Prime 47, the Combine. This is how crazy the Combine was. I could see him. I couldn't get to him because I was jammed up at the bar next to Lance Zierlein and Charlie Campbell and my man Matt Stopsky. So I didn't get a chance to talk to Aaron that night or in Indy, but we love his information, Packers news, all these sorts of things. The buzz has been building. Green Bay will be more active. Matt, do you see it?
I mean, I can certainly see that they will be a little bit, but it'll probably be in an incremental way. Mainly because if Ted Thompson's still in a capacity on some level, that he's going to have at least wield some influence on that. But at the same time, whoever's taking over, and now I don't know the details of who that person is and what their history is with Ted Thompson.
What's that? Brian Gutekunst, and he said he wants to come out and be aggressive this year in free agency.
Then he wants to make his own mark. So there you go. He doesn't want to say he's a Ted Thompson clone. So that just tells you right there that he wants to come out strong. Then that's what you're going to get. I certainly can see how that's going to happen. And anybody's name is Mookie, they're good with me, so that works.
That's all we need is your questions from the chat room going on right now. YouTube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. If you want to subscribe on YouTube as well, and then click that little bell so you get notifications when we're on, and you can just check in and see what we're talking about. Of course, we release this as an episode of the Audible as well. Cheers to you all out there. By the way, Bloom, Josh thinks Jimmy Graham in a Green Bay jersey would be dope. From what we're hearing, Jimmy Graham back in the Saints jersey sounds like what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think so, and that makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. And I think that Graham will still have maybe not the same fantasy value he had last year. He's not going to be the number one option, like a goal line back, basically. But I do think you're going to see him paired up with Drew Brees again. It just makes sense. And I wonder too, speaking about the way the attitude is changing about these things, if some players in these last few contract decisions won't start to look at it in terms of not where will they get the most money, but where will they have the most satisfying experience. I mean, how much cash has Jimmy Graham made in his career now? Enough that $1 million or $2 million, I hate to pile on Cleveland, but I mean, extra money from Cleveland or less money somewhere where you're going to fit in the locker room, where you have a chance to win a Super Bowl. It's going to be fun to be there. I would like
getting wiser.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean,
I think that after what DeMaurice Smith did to basically screw them over, and in terms of his poor negotiation skills, I think a lot of the guys who are your smarter players, are kind of figuring out that, they want to win. And if they continue to win, they can continue to make money, and they're not going to get used in a way that's going to be a horrific experience and being miserable. So, I think you're totally on there.
Audible Live got more questions coming in via the chat room, and this one's one of my favorites from Donovan. He says, who are the big hype small school guys this year? Thanks. For me, Matt, my mind always goes to Dallas Goedert. I was really disappointed we didn't get to see him at the Senior Bowl because of a hamstring injury. But Goedert is that seam ripper. He has some Travis Kelce to his game, in my opinion. So that's where my mind stuck. But there's certainly a bunch of other players. And Goedert, let's just say second round. We know he's highly thought of, could sneak into the first round, what have you. But, there's players in further rounds down. Where's Rock Thomas ranked, right? But there are some great small school players in this draft. maybe small school players that had to transfer to larger schools. Matt, let's highlight a couple of your favorites.
Yeah, I mean, one guy that I really like is Richie James out of Middle Tennessee State. I mean, that may not be the smallest school, but you know, at 5'9", 171, he's kind of a small player from a school that's not, you know, your top tier type of program. But when you look at the way that he plays, he's a guy that can kind of be that running back for you as a scat back in the red zone, but he also wins the ball in the air. He plays like a slot receiver, outside guy at times with really good speed, great ball adjustment. He kind of reminds me of a mixture of, you know, somewhere between Danny Woodhead and then a little bit, just a little bit of Steve Smith. You know, in terms of the way that he plays, he's fearless in the way that he plays. So that's one guy that really kind of strikes me as someone that's interesting. And then Justin Watson, the wide receiver out of Penn. You know, when we watched him at the Senior Bowl, you know, you watched his routes, and he was probably the smoothest route runner in terms of just change of direction, not necessarily the complete package with how he formulated his routes, but just, you know, when you look at a guy at 6'3", 210, just being so good at changing direction and being so smooth that way. And he made a lot of nice catches, and he was getting open in the vertical game consistently in Mobile against the top players. That was a really nice sign. So those are two guys that really come to mind for me.
Bloom, you got any favorite small school guys?
Well, you mentioned Dallas Goedert, and I'll mention his teammate, Jake Weineke, who is you know, a bit of a long strider, didn't blow up the combine in terms of straight line speed, but knows how to use his size to present a big target, is good enough transitioning to run after catch mode, and, you know, is fast enough to eat up the cushion. And yeah, I see the way he varies his speed in his route running to create some separation, and he knows how to use that size, flash his late hands, contract the ball over his shoulders. I think he can be a useful player at the next level without a doubt. I like Darius Fountain out of Northern Iowa. I think
it was a crime that he was not invited to the combine. He's working out with Lauren Landau here in Denver. Amazing. Saw him at the Shrine game. Amazing. I'll get to go watch him work out at Landau's facility. Bloom, I couldn't agree more. It's a great ad.
And Chase Edmonds, I think, who just had his pro day and had a pretty good combine. And I want to say there was an item that the Titans were showing out at his pro day. And, you know, obviously with the release of DeMarco Murray, they're looking for somebody to complement Derrick Henry. I know that Chase Edmonds, I think, can play a James White kind of role, and maybe even be a little bit more than that. So, you know, I think that there's always, I mean, I will say the wide receiver and running back classes are extremely deep. And the running back class, wide receiver class, not necessarily top heavy. Running back class is top heavy, but it's as deep as ever. I know Matt has put some stuff out there about how this year's class, last year's class, and as good as last year's class was. But I think it goes down the board too, and especially goes down the board at wide receiver. So these small school guys are going to find their place. A lot of these guys are going to find a place, and we're going to continue to see that turnover at the skill positions, which matters a lot to us in fantasy.
Matt, the Crow is gaining popularity. Not as popular as Zook. R.I.P. Zook, man. That guy is the greatest cat ever to make an appearance on the Audible. But Wendell's saying the Crow's eye view. You know, people saying that you're in a bunker right now putting together the rookie scouting portfolio. Wi-Fi a little sketchy in the bunker there in Georgia for one Matt Waldman. I want you to write an article, not that you don't write all the damn time, but as the crow flies. You know what I mean? Like, as many crow references as we possibly can. Final thoughts here, Matt, as we tie a bow on tonight's program.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that one thing is, I mean, as Bloom was talking about the depth of this class, I mean, I was saying earlier today that looking at this class and looking at the top 10, top 15 backs, there's some backs outside the top 5 that whenever I see them ranked outside my top 5, I actually feel a little dirty that they're that ranked that low, because in any other class, I mean, I'll put it to you this way, you know, since today we talked a little bit about running backs. There are 12 guys. I think there's 12 guys in this class, if I'm correct, who yet, 12, 14 actually. I think no 12. Yeah, 12 guys I have ranked higher than Jamal Williams, my number 6 running back. 12 guys. So, and then there's actually 5 players or 6 players I have ranked higher than Christian McCaffrey, who was my number 2 ranked running back last year. That's how good this class is. But the thing that you got to keep in mind is that because we had a really good class last year and we had a good class the year before that, that there's going to be a glut. And generally, while, running back, you're going to have to be patient with some of these guys. Some of these guys are going to get drafted behind players, and you're going to be disappointed to find out. One of my favorite backs in this class is Justin Jackson out of Northwestern. I think the kid is incredible, but he may end up going in the 4th or 5th round and end up drafted behind somebody that he has no shot of playing unless that guy gets hurt. But that's the problem in the NFL, is that running backs do get hurt and they devalue pretty quickly. So, I would still recommend to fantasy owners, stockpile running backs. You're going to have to be patient about it, but do that because eventually their turn does come up. And if you can get strong value out of those backs, early, but also in the mid rounds, once you've already, maybe you've cycled through with a quarterback or a receiver. So just because some of these guys may disappoint, it's not always because of the talent or they weren't as talented. It's just because there is a glut at the position based on the past 2 years. And then, these 30 guys, I think, that are coming in there's 30 guys that I think that could be contributors based on talent alone. 30.
Sage-like wisdom from Matt Waldman as the crow flies. There we go. Sigmund, setting the mood, some mood lighting there.
Exactly.
You're like the greatest husband ever.
Yeah, it's candlelight. Let's talk football by candlelight. It's all very romantic.
That sultry voice, or you will seduce.
Yeah. Oh, let's go down an octave. No, but it is romantic. That I think that every year, there was a time, again, 12, 15 years ago, you and me and Matt and a few other thousand of us were just geeked out at this time of year. Like, I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it. Now it's hundreds of thousands, millions even, of football fans that love to be part of the conversation year round. And this is the time when we can talk larger issues, philosophy of team building, philosophy of evaluation, looking at the way the game is changing, because I think we can look at drafts from 2006, 2007, 2008 and see how much the game has changed based on how teams are valued. Players that were pushed aside because they were tweeners. Now being a tweener is a good thing because of the versatility and personnel packages and so many other things. A player like Trey Burton, who was totally overlooked in the draft, now will be the highest paid tight end in this class. And it's really fun to watch this and learn and pretend like we know something, but really learn something and take that journey with everybody.
It is the Audible, and I just want to show you guys this. I want to show both of you guys this, and I will say, Nikki Javala from the Denver Post asked me one time, like, why do you have so many pairs of Jordans? And I said, well, I'm a heavily damaged person, so I cover up emotion with, and you guys both know that. I cover up emotion with shopping.
Retail therapy.
Yes, retail therapy. So before we go, I'm just going to show you these wing ones I got from my man Eli, who can get me anything. I can't flip it like my man Thomas the Franchise, but these are the wing ones, not even laced up, as you can see. Say it on the bottom. They have the Wings logo. Right
Is that what Gene? Show the bottom again.
Show the bottom right there.
That's what Gene sees when Cecil dunks over him in Las Vegas.
Oh, we can say that because Gene's not here, and also they're limited. This is limited to 19,000 pairs. So always good to find some more for the collection. Anyway, I'm a somewhat sneakerhead, just Jay's, a football nut, and a lover of this great game. Love talking football with Sigmund Bloom and Matt Waldman. Appreciate everyone for watching this show, for chiming in, participating in the chat room, who's reacting to all of us as we continue on. I'm going to do some digging on some Broncos news, which may hit very shortly. So everyone just stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty.